When I tell you the topic tonight, I don't want you to get too excited or giddy, okay? I want you to stay calm. The topic tonight is humility. Calm down, calm down. Humility, I know I was surprised myself because obviously none of us need to learn about humility. That's pretty obvious. Anyway, I've been involved with some friends in a Bible study in recent months. And one of the scriptures we looked at is in Luke 18. We looked at the entire chapter of Luke 18, but I'm thinking about one parable we looked at in that chapter. And the title that some you might find in your Bible for that parable is The Pharisee and the Publican. Well, Luke, and his opening commentary just before quoting Jesus, says, now, Jesus gave this parable. I'm saying it, kind of paraphrasing in my own words. The parable was to those self-righteous, self-exalting religious people that look down your nose, that have a look down your nose attitude towards other people. In other words, for people, the parable was especially spoken by Jesus to people who are proud and arrogant. Well, in that parable, the Pharisee, the religious, righteous, self-righteous religious person, would say things, I'm thankful that I'm not like other people. You know, I do this good thing, I fast, I tithe, I attend worship, I do all these good things, and I'm especially thankful that I'm not like that publican over there. And then the publican, Jesus in the parable, gives the response or the prayer of the publican. And that was the Pharisee's prayer. That was his prayer. I thank you, I'm not like other people. I think it leaves a little to be desired, to be honest with you. The publican's prayer was, God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. Right. So the conclusion, Jesus's conclusion to that parable was this. It was an irreversible, no exceptions, universal law. That is his conclusion, and this is it. This is the irreversible, no exceptions, universal law. Everyone who exalts themselves will be humbled. Everyone, it's universal. Everyone who humbles themselves will be exalted. This truth, this universal law, is true in the Old Testament. Everybody from King Nebuchadnezzar, that you'll remember, was so arrogant that his remedy God had for him was to go eat grass like a cow for 7 years. To David, King Nebuchadnezzar, to King David, Old Testament, humbled. The New Testament from King Herod, who died of worms eating him out because he was so arrogant, to Peter. It's true for angels. It's true for presidents. It's true for prophets. It's true for pastors. It's true for Christians. It's true for non-Christians. It's true for the wealthy and powerful. And it's true for common folk like us. It is an inescapable universal law of God. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. Pride and humility are directional. It's from the very root of the word in both Hebrew and Greek. They are directional. Pride's direction is up. We would say things like lifted up in pride, or that person is puffed up, or we consider ourselves above others. Pride is directional, and the direction for pride is up. Humility, in both Hebrew and Greek, is also directional, and the direction is down. So we would say things like down on our knees, or fell at his feet, or the meek and lowly. Humility is a direction, and the direction is down. Now, this is a universal law because pride is a universal problem. There are people that you and I would respect that have written famous authors that would say pride is the core problem of all the human race. Pride is the core problem. Well, pride is a universal problem. Tonight, I'm going to tell you that I think the Bible teaches, and Jesus in his parable taught us, there are two ways of dealing with pride. Two ways. One way is we can humble ourselves. The second way is we can be humbled. We can humble ourselves, or we can be humbled. Each method has an active and a passive component. We humble ourselves, that is, we take the action, we humble ourselves, but the result is we are exalted. Somebody else is doing the action. We are passively being exalted. Ultimately, it's God, but he uses other people, uses circumstances. We actively humble ourselves, and we passively receive being exalted. The opposite is true. We exalt ourselves. That's our action. We exalt ourselves. The result is passive. We are going to be humbled. Somebody else does the humbling. Nobody in their right mind would do it to themselves from being exalted. Somebody else does it to us. Ultimately, it's God, but frequently uses somebody else or some situation. Our action, our active action, brings about a response that we have nothing to do with. Well, I am of the opinion that though it's not easy and it does not come naturally, I am of the opinion that it is far better to humble ourselves than to be humbled. I don't know if you have had a painful experience of being humbled, but I have. And today I can look back and say, yes, well, it was much needed. It was well planned, it was well executed, and much needed. But I don't ever want to go through that again. Of course, I said that the first time too. And it wasn't just once. That some reason I forget these things. I forget, friends, that it is so much better to humble ourselves than end up having to be humbled. To me, it's like the difference between gently lowering myself to the floor to do exercises, which is a humbling experience in itself. It's the difference between gently and slowly easing myself down to the floor to do exercises versus somebody throwing me down to the floor like an antagonist. That to me is the difference. Let me just tell you a brief story. When I was in college, I was in judo club. Watch out if you get close to me. Wow. Anyway, I was in judo club. I wasn't great or anything, but I could hold my own with people of my own experience. Well, one time in this judo club, we had this special meeting because some judo dignitary, like a 9th degree South Korean black belt or something, a little old man. It turns out he was a little old man in his 60s. Back then, I thought he was old. And so as part of this kind of a celebration for this dignitary, a judo dignitary coming, the judo club officers or whoever invited, maybe it was 10 or 12 judo experts, black belt experts, to come to our club meeting where they would they lined up across the front and would help us individually. We could come up to them one at a time, and they would kind of give us some one-on-one instruction. Well, of these 10 or 12 judo experts, most of them of Asian descent, I noted. Anyway, there was all of them, there were probably 12 of them and probably 60 of us. And so we had to wait in line. And I noticed that every one of those judo experts had somebody come up to them, except one exceptionally large Korean-looking guy who we found out was a 5th degree black belt in judo. Nobody was going to him. I should have taken that as a clue, shouldn't I? But I ended up feeling sorry for him. So I went up to him. He was big, he was sturdy, he was like an oak tree, but I was big too. So anyway, I went up to him and we did our bow and all that kind of stuff. And I was just doing the little bit I knew, I was doing that on him. And then I was just pausing, wondering what I was going to do next. And that's the last thought I had. Because the next thing I knew, I was flying in the air. And I fell down and my elbow jammed into my thigh. And I could hardly move. To me, my experiences of being humbled have been like that. That was a humbling thing, by the way, and I believe with all my heart that if we could only learn to humble ourselves, we would be so much better off. So much better off. If God says that humility is essential for our well-being and essential for our spiritual growth, essential to our spiritual life, humility, if it's essential, a good question would be, well then, how can I learn humility? How can I learn to humble myself? I'm going to tell you about 2 different ways. I'm sure there are more ways than 2. I'm just going to talk about 2 ways. 2 ways to learn humility. And the first way is cognitively. We're going to learn it cognitively, the cognitive path to humility. I mean, it's cognitive because I come to a realization of a basic truth, and or it's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking about my life, about ourselves. And I embrace and realize this basic truth. And I end up, this is the way I'm going to think about myself. Well, the truth is this. This is the basic truth. Everything good that I am, I've been given, or that I've received, that I have, every possession, anything about my life that I would classify as good, that is a gift from God. Everything. James says every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. Paul, talking to the Corinthians who found it easy to become arrogant about everything, including even spiritual gifts, Paul said to them, well, what is to Corinthians, what do you have that you have not received? In other words, what can you name that's good that wasn't a gift to you? The basic truth is anything and everything that's good in our lives, that was a gift from God. Do you have possessions, little or few? Well, listen to what David says when he's praying about the people giving to the temple, that he's collecting things for Solomon, you know. He says to God in his prayer, both riches and honor come from you. You rule over all. In your hand is power and might. It lies in your hand to make great and to strengthen. Whoever is great, whoever gets strengthened. If you have a penny, that penny came from God. If you have $1,000, it came from God. If you have a nice car, it came from God. If you have a home you like, it came from God. It came from God. If you have a garden, it came from God. If you like your yard, it came from God. If you have pretty flowers, they came from God. If you live in God's playground and the beauty of nature, it came from God. Anything that you can say, gee, this is good, that was a gift from God. He goes on to say, who am I? And who are my people? That we should be able, because everybody was offering generously, that we should be able to offer for the temple as generously as this. For all things come from you, and from your hand we have given you. Even the things you give away, even your tithe at church, anytime you're generous, anything you might give to somebody else, that was first given to you. You're only giving back to God what he first gave to you. Are you having fun yet? Are you intelligent? Well, who created you and gave you your mind? Are you strong and athletic? Who built you and put your bones together? Are you spiritual? Well, who saved you? Who forgave you? Who gave you his spirit? You don't have anything good in your life. I don't have anything good in my life that was not a gift from God. It's the basic truth. And the proper response, beloved friends, the proper response when we receive a gift isn't pride, it's gratitude. The only legitimate and proper response to receiving a gift is gratitude, because we know we had it, by definition, a gift means we had nothing to do with it. The response to receiving a gift is gratitude expressed with thanksgiving from a humble heart. That's the only response, the only proper response to receiving a gift. And if everything we have is a gift, then that's the only legitimate response. One path to humility is a cognitive path, recognizing and intellectually embracing this truth. If I have anything good, it was nothing but a gift from God. But there's a second way I'd like to talk about. And the second way is the experiential path. The experiential path to humility. And I take as an example of that, a biblical example from Luke chapter 5, Peter's experience. You remember, let me just tell you, remember Jesus was at the lake shore and he wanted to speak to a large crowd of people on the lake shore. And so he got into a boat. It happens to be Peter's boat. And he said, Peter, go out just a little bit from land. And so he sat in the boat and he taught the people up on the shore. And then he finished, he dismissed everybody, and he said to Peter, well, let's go on out further so we can catch some fish. And of course, you remember Peter said, well, you know, I've been fishing all night long, Jesus, and I am the professional fisherman after all. But still, you know, I'm not going to say no to Jesus. And so I'm going to go out. And he said, all right, this is good. Go ahead and throw out your nets. And you know the story that the nets, they had more than one boat. They had partners, you know, and at least two boats. And so the nets that they threw out, it was like God commanded every fish within 500 yards to jump into those nets. They could hardly get those nets up out of the lake. And when they finally did and put them in the boat started to sink and they had to call another partner, come on. And so every boat they called out there, they had so many fish, all the boats, they had a hard time getting them into the shore. This is what happened when it says, when Simon Peter saw what happened. In other words, when Simon Peter experienced what Jesus had done, it says, he fell down. He went down at Jesus' feet. And he said, similar to the publican in the parable, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." He went down. Humility can be gained by recognizing and embracing the truth that every good thing about me is a gift from God, which I did nothing to merit or deserve. That's one way. But humility can also be gained through an encounter with the living God, where we experience his goodness and grace and glory firsthand. And in all, like Peter, we can only respond by falling on our knees in humility, praising him, worshiping him, and adoring him. In our prayer time tonight, somebody in your group, after praying and waiting on God for his wisdom and guidance, this is just a suggestion. Now you can do what, if God has you do something different, that's perfectly okay. But whoever shares, if you would prayerfully consider and share about a good thing you have received from God for which you want to give thanks. Maybe it's something that you've already at some point in the past given thanks for, or maybe it's something that you've taken for granted and not really considered the generous heart and hand of God in the receiving of that gift. And if that comes to your mind, I think this would be an appropriate night to say thanks for it. Or if you've already, just something that whatever God brings to your mind that overwhelms you now, that's something you received and now you, if never before, you realize, well, this is a gift from God and I'd like to thank him for it. I'd like to express gratitude for it. Those then who are listening to you, those who will end up doing blessing prayers, I would like you, while you're listening and then praying about what kind of blessing you would give, to ask God to give you a heart and give you words of blessing for that person who shared. Now, maybe the blessing will include something like blessing them with an awe-producing, joy-filled experience of the presence and power of God in their lives, which would be one of the paths to humility. It goes beyond cognitive, because Peter could never even have thought of the blessing that Jesus was about to pour upon him. This he experienced firsthand, right in his face, something unimaginably glorious and good and generous by the hand of God. So maybe your blessing could include something like that if God leads you that way. Well, I think I'm done. Sure do appreciate all of you.